So this week we have Seoul, which is 10 days of celebrating forward-thinking wellness. There are many conferences around the world around wellness and other subjects, but there are very few barefoot conferences. And what's really interesting is that we have these leaders in a new dimension of wellness and healthcare. And these people are here at Soneva Fushi together, barefoot, in a casual setting, sharing ideas. And they'll, I hope, leave this island enriched and enlightened, which has the impact not just to change people's lives, but to change the world.
The Seoul Festival is an immersive journey into wellness, a journey from the personal to the planetary, this understanding that to truly create a healthy and thriving world, we need to start within. The festival has brought together visionary pioneers from across the wellness space, from many disciplines. We have doctors, we have scientists, we have artists, culinary chefs, business leaders, all who have dedicated themselves to the path of wellness and to uplifting humanity. What does true wellness mean to you?
For me, and obviously it is really personal, it's to remember that at the level of the soul, nothing is missing. We create perceptions in our earthly experience that there's so much missing, that we're not good enough, not tall enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not loud enough, not quiet enough. We create all sorts of beliefs in our own deficiency. And we all do that between 0 and 7, no matter how calm or chaotic it is when we're growing up. And because of that belief in our deficiency, it creates essentially a void, which in the way I see it all, that then creates our values. And when I use the word values, I don't mean ethical preferences like kindness and generosity. I mean, what does our life actually demonstrate that we value? So through our values, particularly through our highest values, I think we are essentially pursuing what our soul already knows, is that there's nothing missing. So ultimate wellness, for me, is being our true selves, is authenticity, and it's coming back to that knowing that there is actually nothing missing. But hopefully through the pursuit of our values, we contribute significantly to the lives of others, as well as being reminded of that truth ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Libby. Luke, would you like to share?
Thank you. It's great to be here. So over the years, I've had many patients from different fields of disease and across the world. My learning of wellness continues to change. Today, I believe it's a belief system about how we feel. There's the soul level. There is the root cause of why we feel a particular way. There's an understanding of why we have a disease that even exists within us. I also believe that wellness respects bio-individuality. Every one of us over here are different. Carbs may suit some of us. Protein may suit some of us. Fats, it's different. I've never seen the same body break down the same amount of carbohydrates equally. I've never seen the same amount of chemotherapy cycles give the same results for a patient who has the same stage of cancer. And I think wellness is respecting that bio-individuality, so we don't fall into the trap of being into a box that tells us fast 16-8, sleep 8 hours, go low carb, go high protein, because we're different. And we're changing dynamically all the time. Our cells are responding to the island air. Our microbiome in our gut right now is already changing according to the air that we breathe. So I believe wellness is evolving all the time, and if we can be clued into our inner self all the time, mindfully, observing our appetite, how we feel, and making the right choices in the terms of food, the kind of movement, the kind of sleep, quality sleep, and our emotional wellness, I believe that's true wellness.
The soul of wellness is a recognition of our interconnection. That's essentially what it is. We've all been playing these games thinking that we are separate beings, that we're separated from our environments, that we're separated from our mind and our emotions. And as we come into a deeper exploration and experience of our wellness, we recognize how deeply interconnected we are.
The soul of wellness obviously means something about our health and the way we're living on this planet. And what's really important to understand as a former medical school professor is that when we were working on understanding human biology and physiology, we looked at the body as a machine, and that there were parts, and that when it wasn't working right, something was wrong with the parts. Something more like an auto mechanic taking a car and saying, oh, here's a defect in this part and we're going to replace the part. But then over time, we started to recognize there's a little bit more, something that medical doctors couldn't figure out what it was, because they thought, well, if it's just a machine, I change the part, everything should work, and occasionally it never worked that way. And then we started to find out, well, wait, there's something else going on, something in the background that didn't show up for us. We now know what it is, and that is that the mind and consciousness are fundamental in manifesting the experiences of the human body. Now, when I was teaching in a medical school, we never used the word mind. And spirituality, well, that was forbidden even in any conversation in a medical school. But over time, and especially now with research into the science of epigenetics, where consciousness is influencing our genetics and our behavior, all of a sudden it says, wait, we're moving into a new realm right now. And that something you might call the soul, the spirit, the energy behind life, is something we never incorporated into understanding conventional medicine. But today, now we recognize not only is it involved, but it actually is the source of everything that happens below our neck, is coming from the mind and what we believe about life, our consciousness, our positive beliefs, and especially more important, our negative beliefs, which have a profound effect on our health.
How many of you, when you arrived here, whether it was yesterday, today, day before, had an experience when you got here of, anyone have that experience? I know I did. Raise your hand if you had an experience of just feeling like, Now, how many of you had that also either last night or when you woke up this morning? Raise your hand. Now, I start with this because to me, that feeling of, that's wellness. It doesn't mean I'm not jet lagged. It doesn't mean that I'm not overtired. It doesn't mean that I'm not hungry. I mean, a lot of us, as we arrived yesterday, arrived in physically challenging situations. Maybe there was some pain in a shoulder or a back or a neck from lugging a suitcase or chasing after kids or whatever it might be. But despite jet lag or fatigue or hunger or a kink in the neck, there was an experience of, we've come back into alignment, balance, connection. And to me, that is what wellness is. And that's why we so frequently experience it in nature. Because when we're in nature, it reconnects us to the truth of who we are on a physical level, on an energetic level, on a spiritual level. So to me, that's wellness. In Ayurveda, they speak about balance. But it's not balance just kapha, pitta, vata. It's not just that. It's a balance between us and our environment. It's a balance between, I won't go into it with lack of time, but a balance between what we speak about as the 5 different sheaths, the 5 different bodies that we have, between what we're physically intaking, to our vitality, how we breathe, our energetic systems, to our mental state, what we're thinking, feeling, to deeper states of actually how our minds work. All of this, when it's in alignment, in balance, connected, that's wellness. And then lastly, it's in alignment with our planet also. There's a reason that Ayurveda and so many systems of ancient and traditional medicine speak about, well, this is a great thing to eat this time of the year. This is a great practice to do this time of the year. This is a great practice to do or thing to eat in this type of place. Because we need to be in alignment with the earth. And when we are in alignment, full balance, full alignment within this self and in the extended self, that's real wellness.
The soul of wellness is just being and being okay with whatever state you are in. And I think there's this misconception that's been growing lately where there's a certain archetype of wellness that we have to fit into. And so in a way, especially in Western society, we're now working to achieve another thing, right? This picture of wellness. And when I think about wellness, it's peace. But it's not peace in the perfection of you, it's peace in the range of your emotions. So the soul of wellness is having a challenging day and still knowing I am well. I have me, I love me, I trust me. And that wellness is cultivated over time with self, but it's also cultivated through practice, through community, through connecting with the divine. So the soul of wellness ultimately is quite simple. It's being where you are and knowing that you're okay.
The soul of wellness is very personal. It's very internal. We all have, different, unique talents. I like to focus on the word bio-individuality. Everyone is different. No two identical twins have the same thumbprints as well. The soul wellness starts from within. I would say that the external circumstances and the external environment can impact our soul, but all change happens from within. To me, that is soul wellness.
Ayurveda has spoken of wellness thousands of years ago, trying to make us understand who we are. Because what is Ayurveda? It's a science of life. It's a lifestyle. And Ayurveda talks about true wellness being sustaining what you know. It is wonderful to have treatments in this beautiful complex in places where you can go and detoxify, where you can go and rejuvenate. But what happens after that? Education is very important, awareness is very important, and sustaining yourselves in between the treatments with a dinacharya, a daily routine which Ayurveda emphasizes on. Because the aim of Ayurveda is to preserve good health, is to get rid of disease. That's the aim of Ayurveda, to maintain ourselves. It's very simple, and you don't have to make it very complex. Of course, you can have in-depth treatments when you go to the Ayurvedias, when you go to aromatic medicine specialists, when you go for any other treatment. They will do it for you. They will make you understand that you are not just this body, that you are made up of trillions of cells which have memory chips. So Ayurveda gave us all that. Ayurveda gave us diet, herbs, meditation, aromatics. Aromatics play a very important role in your lifestyle because it centers you. It brings you into balance, as we are these tiny microcosms of this vast macrocosm, the universe. So if we can sustain ourselves and we can make a daily practice, it doesn't have to be long, just short little practices in the busy lifestyles that we have, bringing ourselves from the sympathetic mode of fear, flight, fight to rest, relax, repair, getting our gadgets out of the way at night so we have a sound sleep. Sleep has become an epidemic these days. So awareness, education, sustenance of your body, mind, and connecting on a soul level. These are simple techniques which you can use for yourself in your daily routine. And if you do that, then your consciousness will be raised. Because in this time and age, we have to be like the lotus, which lives in muck, and yet it blooms. And all of us can do that, because all of us are sensual creatures. So diet is very important as well. Alkaline foods, less acidic foods, cleansing the mind. And that's what true wellness is all about.
It would never leave
The Soul Festival is different for me because it actually is about the soul in a scientific way. So that's the twist on it. You know, it's like we can control our soul, our spirit, our light by changing, shifting our direction of thought with nutrition, with exposure to other people. If we change our environment, we can change how we feel and perceive what's coming into our lives. And that, for me, is the ultimate power.
So being at Soneva Fushi, well, I could not imagine a more perfect place to have a wellness festival. When you hear the word soul, from personal to planetary, this is it. We are here in the soul of this island, sharing our personal experiences and connecting to the cosmos, connecting to each other. It's extraordinary. The energy here is conducive to positivity, to really feeling your best, feeling in flow with yourself, with each other. And in a space like that, I think only the highest level energy can be shared. And that's what's been happening. So when you get here on the boat, they take your shoes. And I've never had this experience before where I show up someplace and I'm literally barefoot the whole time. And that's so awesome. I also just have fallen in love with riding bikes barefoot through these little jungle trails, whether it be the morning or in a rainstorm or at night, there's just these little lights. It's helped me to reconnect with myself, with the environment, and just feeling my feet on the ground. I mean, earthing is one of the best wellness practices we can make an everyday thing in our lives. So just literally having a chance to practice that 24/7 has been such a gift.
Feel it all connecting. Feel it all connecting.
Our personal view, my personal view, and the view of our senior leadership here at Soneva, and something we try and stimulate with our team members, is that sort of wellness is having a fulfilling life, a sense of purpose, great relationships. We know that the meaning of life is, at least we believe at Soneva, is the relationships that we create, and the joy and the close connection. And we try and stimulate that amongst our team members. And when you have great relationships, you have a fulfilling purpose, and you have the health and capacity to enjoy that, that, in my opinion, is wellness at its most. And if you pursue these habits, the goals will be fulfilled.
So, William, I want to ask you the question just from your personal feeling. What is true wellness to you?
Well, you know, when I was a kid, growing up in India, we used to drive behind trucks, and many of them had sayings on the back. And my favorite saying as a child was, you know, on the back of the truck was, "Health is wealth." And I think I can't think of anything more profound to say than that.
I grew up on the coast, and spending much of my time in the ocean inspired me to learn more about it. And I always knew I wanted to help our oceans and conserve them. I'm Zoe, a marine biologist and project manager for Coral Live. I truly experienced coral reefs for the first time here in the Maldives, and the reality hit me hard. It was the opposite of the vibrant reef I had imagined. There was basically nothing left of the reef. During this time, I met Aki, the founder of Coral Live. Coral Live's main work is coral restoration using mineral accretion technology. I immediately knew that I wanted to change the focus of my career to help the corals.
My wife Ava introduced me to the Maldives in 1987. When we first came to Soneva Fushi, the reef was absolutely unbelievable. It was vibrant and live with coral surrounded by fish. It was the 1998 coral bleaching event when you really started to see the impact on the reefs. The corals died and didn't recover before the next major bleaching event in 2016. With more frequent bleaching events from rising sea temperatures, over 90% of the world's coral reefs are under threat. Coral reefs provide habitat for a quarter of all marine species, coastal protection for communities, and millions of dollars from tourism and recreation. The survival of coral reefs is critical for the Maldives. It is our survival. If we don't change, we will sink, not just as an island, but also as a nation. We've always considered ourselves, Ava and I, as guardians, yes, guardians, not owners, of this place, and we feel that we are here to guard this place for a lifetime and for generations to follow. Nature is resilient, and human endeavor and innovation also contribute to conservation efforts. Our goal is to restore the reefs around Soneva Fushi, Soneva Jani, and our other properties in the Maldives by 2030, and to create a diversity of coral that will survive and thrive. We have not given up. This is why we decided to establish one of the world's largest coral nurseries, powered by mineral accretion technology in collaboration with Coral Live.
This project is a stepping stone between small-scale and large-scale restoration efforts to save entire reefs. After selecting the right location, we first put 432 metal structures in the water, which we all interconnect with cables to run a small electrical current through them. At the center of each circle of tables is an anode. The circular formation around the anodes gives us the most efficient electrical distribution to each table. The electricity creates an environment for corals to thrive. We have observed faster growth and increased resilience to stresses causing bleaching events. Now it's time to start populating the nursery. For Soneva Fushi, we are saving coral from a development site, where the corals are destined to be covered by sand and die. The corals are sent to Soneva Fushi, where the rest of the team receives them and places them on the nursery. The whole team is doing amazing work, and seeing everyone working together towards a common goal makes it an empowering, unforgettable experience. We can grow about 50,000 coral fragments in the nursery, which can then be harvested annually and outplanted to the reef. Knowing we can set up such a huge project in a short amount of time really opens up opportunities for the future. What else can we do? How big can we go? It's very exciting. I don't think we'll ever be finished, but I think we can always strive to do more. I never saw coral reefs before the major bleaching events, so it would be incredible to see them coming back to that level, which would be very motivating to keep going, to aim bigger, and to push forward to do more.
So we're going to start off. I have one question which I'd like you all to answer in turn, if you could. So we've been hearing about the soul of wellness. We are more than our bodies. So I want to ask you, what is science to you? Why do we need science to tell us about wellness?
Well, very briefly, if I can be brief, is simply that science isn't really based on anybody's particular opinion. Science is based on study, research, facts, and predictability. That's the important part. And science is valid across the entire planet. No matter what culture you're in, there's science, and that supersedes any personal or cultural different beliefs. Science is universal. And as I said, most importantly, it's not really created by personal beliefs, but it's by research that can be shown and predictable.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer would be that, you don't really need science to understand wellness. I mean, there's many disciplines, ancient healing traditions that have taught over thousands of years what wellness is, and I think we see a lot of renaissance of those concepts. I think what science can contribute to it, to identify mechanisms, for example, like the placebo response, like the stress response, like all the things that Bruce presented, all comes from science. So Bruce wouldn't be able to give his talk if there weren't the science. So I think what we're dealing with today, science has been, and modern medicine has been, in my opinion, incredibly successful for a lot of diseases. Acute diseases has saved, millions of lives. But we see a failure in chronic diseases. Science has not really caught up to that point that has come up with effective recommendations. And so it's gotten a bad rep amongst many alternative practitioners, and it's too bad, because I think we always should remember antibiotics, one of the most successful inventions of science ever. There's nothing in alternative medicines that comes even close to the effectiveness and the life saved with antibiotics. But I've become totally aware in my career the failure both of the science and conventional medicine in dealing with this epidemic of chronic diseases, so we have a complete disconnect from that.
I think at best, science should not be scientism, right? Science was always meant to be an objective pathway for understanding the truth, just like spiritual traditions are as well. Where we've run into problems, I think, typically now is that, first of all, we believe that science is objective. We want it to be, but in truth, it's really not, because it's informed by the mind, and the mind is informed by conscious experience. And so we've seen that when we create this artificial division between spiritual traditions and what we call science, what we're doing is just limiting the abilities for us to use science as the tool that it's meant to say, well, what's my first person experience? And so we see this in meditation. What's my experience, and how might that inform my hypotheses about the world? Then can I go out and test those hypotheses? Can I see if they're repeatable? And for wellness, it's really great for us to use the scientific method, because if we want to know whether there's a particular way, a meditation practice, a different practice to help a particular patient population, then we can do those studies
but they can still be informed by the mind that is also informed by conscious experience. So I don't believe there is a division, honestly, between the spiritual experience and the scientific method.
Can I just make one quick comment? It is a slippery slope to say that the mind informs the science, and then the science just the experiments. I mean, as Bruce said, I mean, science is one of the most objective approaches to answer questions, hypotheses, and yes or no. So, I mean, I do agree with within a lot of things, but I mean, this is one thing. I think it's a slippery slope to go down and introduce the mind, determining what science can control.
I should clarify that the mind decides the hypotheses to test and what is considered to be something worthy of scientific inquiry or not. That is completely shaped by cultural experience. So that's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul, I'll let you come in.
Yeah, I think I'm the one illness expert in this whole business of wellness as a surgeon, because we surgeons usually try to solve things with a knife. And we have very clear-cut approach to how we do things. But science, of course, is a very important element. As far as the human being is concerned, we have the body and the health. These are open to investigation. There are a number of ways in which we can actually look at the metabolic system, we can look at the cardiovascular system, we can actually work out the cognitive competence. But if the second element, that is the life of the brain, because essentially what science does is it creates data. And with the data, we can either substitute or reinforce faith. That's what it does, really. And in the second realm, when we come to the capability of the brain, particularly as we now look to the new world that is going to open to us with artificial intelligence, where the man's cognitive abilities or demands are going to be substituted significantly, we enter into a much more difficult way in which we can understand and create data with which to substantiate the claims that we make. Then thirdly, there is the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm, see, every time I operate, I pray. There are two ways in which actually converges, because I do know that the results and the outcomes that are produced in surgery are not entirely the outcomes determined by the data. They far exceed. There are things which we see which are mind-boggling. And I think in this particular, I am so happy to be here, because this is one forum on which this can be unashamedly explored and discussed. And that's my take on it. It's the one way of substantiating or eliminating faith.
For me, science is essential in understanding, studying, enhancing wellness, because science for me is not a collection of jargon or a particular worldview. It's a way of questioning the world, of finding out about how things work. We ask questions of nature and we listen to the answers, and that's how we progress. So for me, if we really want to understand how we can enhance our wellness, science is an absolute sort of cornerstone of that. Sometimes in the past, or actually even in the present as well, science is associated with a particular materialist worldview and particular assumptions about how reality works. And I think for me, some of the most interesting frontiers of science are where we're actually starting to move past that a little bit. But that actual idea that we are going to ask questions and listen to the answers, we're going to do experiments, we're going to do trials, we're going to pay attention to the results, is really, really important. Where there is a tension, I think, when we're looking specifically at wellness, it's because wellness is so personal. It's about how we feel. It's subjective, it's different for every person. So you have science on the one hand, which its strength is being objective. We are going to find sort of hard information that we can all measure and agree on, regardless of individual beliefs. But then you're using that to try to understand and enhance something that depends on all of us as an individual. And I find that challenge really fascinating. How do we take those really important tools of science, but still accommodate the fact that we're all different and that our beliefs and our personalities and our feelings, just the fact that we are human, not just physical bodies. How do we accommodate that to come to an evidence-based understanding of wellness that sort of still puts humanity at its heart? What ways in science can we sort of accommodate those human differences without losing our objectivity? And are there different areas in health where one is perhaps more important than another?
It's interesting. I mean, what my mind went to, and I don't want to get too boring about methodology, but we often have this discussion in clinical research where we say, is the randomized controlled trial really something that we should be engaging in when we're looking at things like wellness and what works for whom? Because typically, how many of you have heard of a randomized controlled trial, or RCT? Okay, so most of you. And you remember in science where they talked to you about max, min, con, right? Maximize the effect of a particular thing, a pill, which is what the RCT was based for, right? Minimize all the variants, minimize everything else that could influence the potential outcome. So let's say we're looking at a medication to affect depression, then we're gonna minimize everything else, right? And we're gonna try to get rid of all the confounders. And when we do those studies, we end up getting a really unrealistic picture of things. So that's unhelpful, because a lot of the times then if we do those clinical trials, they're for a very small set of the population, say, that only has depression but not anxiety. Well, over 80%, I think, at this point, of people have comorbid depression and anxiety. So it's not what we call generalizable. But we can still use science. We use different ways. We can do effectiveness studies, for example, that are more real world, where we're getting out there and we're not throwing people in a lab and saying, you've got to do it this way, and we're going to tell you how many sessions, and we're going to tell you how the healing session should go. But we simply observe. We're still using the scientific method, but now we're looking at it in the real world. What's actually happening on the ground? Is what's happening on the ground effective? And we can still use the scientific tools. So that allows us to broaden our base in wellness research to see what's really working and for whom, and how can we optimize our programs or the things that we're doing for people in different communities. So now it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but could it be that this particular type of healing, which is native to a particular community already, an indigenous healing practice, would be very effective because it's more culturally relevant, versus something else that's maybe more relevant to a different culture? So these are just some ideas of how we can still use science and make it more relevant.
And I was going to make a comment. So the two of us are dealing with diseases and have trained and have practiced for decades now to dealing with disease and not with wellness. Wellness is even gut health, for example, is a concept that I've never heard in my entire career as a gastroenterologist until maybe 5 years ago. It's still very hard to actually explain what that is. So the randomized controlled trials were developed as tools to have interventions, medications, surgeries for diseases, not to prove effectiveness of wellness. So if you sort of loosen the entry criteria and make it broader, that problem gets even more severe, because the mouse studies, you have genetically identical animals. They live in the same cage, the same temperature, same circadian rhythm. And the reason I think that all of them fail is because humans it's a varied population. You would need 10 times more subjects than are currently being used in these randomized studies. So I think to summarize this in terms of wellness studies, I share your skepticism that the traditional model of randomized controlled trials is not really the right way to affect it, to assess it. And wellness is a very subjective thing. You don't even have, if you have cancer, if you have a cancer study, you either have the cancer or you don't have it. If you have inflammatory bowel disease, you either have the disease or you don't have it. In wellness, it's a very soft term. Different people understand different things, as we have heard this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most fascinating things that are coming up now is the understanding of complexity. Last night I think I spoke about Heisenberg's paper. And with complexity, we begin to realize that the human biology is a very complex organism where you have tremendous functional redundancy with tremendous structural economy. That is to say, the structural elements that make up the composition of our biology and make up what we can achieve with physiology cannot entirely be explained on the basis of the structural elements. The functional outcomes have a quantum which is independent of what is happening. And also, unlike the animals, the force of intelligence that we are able to actually bring in, it's very, very difficult mathematically to actually use evolutionary arguments to really posit that how human beings have become so intelligent. It does not seem to be an incremental change. And now we are beginning to see these leaps of imagination that is taking place. Therefore, there is a space in which we begin to realize that we have to look at phenomenology, not just we break down something and look at the elements, because there we can only catch one window of the elephant and say it is a leg or the tail. But to really recognize, till now the methodologies for doing did not exist. But I think in the last 5 years, with the way artificial intelligence and the data analytics is going, we are going into a very exciting field where we are going to investigate this sort of phenomena like healing and things like this. And actually one of the very interesting areas where I'm working is to really unravel how we can actually understand the complexity and the outcomes that ensue because of the complexity. But I was very curious to know, Bruce, about how do you define consciousness? Because you mentioned consciousness. Because as a scientist, if we know what is the definition of consciousness, we probably can go about finding it out.
That's a really good question. Let me just bring it up because it is fundamental. What is consciousness? And I can show you like a paper with paragraphs describing consciousness, or you can look at just the simplest basic understanding of consciousness as being aware, having awareness of what's going on. And the important part about this is this led people like Lynn Margulis, a microbiologist, to recognize, yeah, when we talk consciousness, everyone's thinking human consciousness, but she says, look, bacteria have consciousness. They live in a world, they read the environment, they adjust themselves to that environment, so they're aware of what's going on, so they have consciousness, but I think it's something you can build on. You can have primitive consciousness and then start to build layers on top of it until you get to human self-consciousness, and that's important. And I believe when we hear Dr. Mayer talk, to recognize people don't understand the microbiome, that's a new word for most people in the public, is that we are covered with bacteria in everything that's open to the outside, our digestive system, our urogenital system, everything in the head, bacteria, but in the gut, it's most important. As a matter of fact, they changed the definition of a human. A human is now called a superorganism because you cannot live without the bacteria. Bacteria are fundamental to our life. And we also know now, as you're going to talk about, I hope, is the bacteria in the gut communicate with our brain, and our brain communicates with the bacteria. There's a dialogue, and they work with each other. And in fact, even our bacteria in our gut can affect our genetic behavior. So it really says that there's a whole new understanding that we have to incorporate as humans.
So, I mean, you brought up a very important point. I mean, I've been struggling with this and asked a lot of very intelligent people, do the microbes, it's the most abundant life form on Earth and the oldest, going back, billions of years, with a tremendous amount of knowledge and gene material, outpassing human genes by, hundreds. And it's not just the ones in our gut, it just happens to be that's where they're most concentrated on, but they're everywhere. They're in the ocean, they're on the trees, everywhere. Does that system have a consciousness? I mean, I think the answer for, an easy answer is, I absolutely believe it has an intelligence, there's no question, and it's a lot bigger than our brain intelligence. Consciousness, I'm not so sure. Self-consciousness, I would say no.
No. Yes.
But consciousness would probably be a careful yes.
I agree. Self-consciousness, no. That was a building up of consciousness. But basic, fundamental consciousness is your ability to make a response that something's going on in the environment, which means you can read the environment in some sense and make an appropriate biological response to survive whatever's going on. So there, to me, there's a gradation of consciousness. Very primitive, but it can become maximized as we have in the human brain.
I think that the concept of wellness is absolutely something that's a really exciting area in science right now. So it's not everywhere. There's plenty of science that isn't particularly engaging with that issue, but this idea of how can we enhance well-being? How can we look at the individual? How can we think about the positive in terms of growth and health rather than just fixing problems? That is absolutely a key part that you're seeing in many areas of psychology, of neuroscience, of medicine. We have the positive psychology movement, which is a few decades old now. So this whole idea of we don't want to just be free from mental illness, we actually want to thrive and sort of improve how we're feeling. You've got researchers looking at topics like happiness and awe and joy and social connection. You wouldn't really have seen any of that a few decades ago. It was all about stress and depression and anxiety, and those are still really important topics, but we're seeing that just negating those problems isn't good enough. We have to sort of see that as a continuum and have these positive states of mind to aim for. In neuroscience as well, you're looking at how does perception work? How does consciousness work? The interest in psychedelic drugs, for example, and realizing the psychological benefits of those, but connecting all of these subjective states of consciousness with the neuroscience, with the mechanics of what are the states of the brain that lie underneath that. In medicine as well, increasingly we're seeing a realization that you can't just treat patients as physical bodies, as machines. You have to be paying attention to how people are doing it as a human being. That social connection with the patient, looking after sort of how somebody is feeling, their stress levels, just using really simple techniques, words, care, empathy, expectation, hope, all of these ingredients, folding those into medical treatments. You don't just see reductions in stress and anxiety and pain and people doing better from a subjective point of view. You're actually seeing really fundamental improvements in physical outcomes as well. And so in conditions everywhere from chronic pain through to surgery for breast cancer and heart disease, through to later in life, Parkinson's, dementia, it's that connected view of us as human beings that I think is really growing. I think there's a long way to go. I think we're sort of at the beginning of that revolution rather than at the end, but I do see more and more people getting interested in that, more and more really fascinating research coming out on that as well. So what are we learning about the importance of our relationships with other people in terms of our health and our wellness?
Psychoneuroimmunology has usually been used to study my brain, its effect on my gut, the effect on my health. But when we apply those tools of psychoneuroimmunology to interconnection, it's tremendous. And I talked about this in a TEDx talk that I did last year. It was the healing power of connection. And some of what I'll be leading us to is we have an intuitive sense of this, right? And Shauna even, I think, talked about how if you already feel a connection with someone and they hurt themselves, your insula will get activated. Well, that's very real. There are many, many studies now done at UCLA by Naomi Eisenberger and colleagues, right, that have shown this empathetic response where we can witness the suffering of someone else and have the same pain response as they might, social pain, right, a lot of things like that. But that also applies to healing and health. I believe that the extension of psychoneuroimmunology, which is the home area where I did my PhD work, will be extended to what we call beyond the physical body and those aspects of wellness, including what many of us have been calling the energetic body, which we also call the biofield, because the data is actually suggesting strongly at this point, and in cell and animal studies as well, which I will share tomorrow, that our healing connection can influence a biological system even beyond a human being, in a cell, or even the spread of tumors in an animal. We have hardly any scientific frame of reference for this, but we have more and more emerging data suggesting that this power of connection that we have is very real and truly seems to be extending beyond what we call the physical body. So, and of course we know the data, connection heals. Loneliness kills, the flip side is connection heals. It's one of the biggest healers that we have, human to human, but human to planet as well, so.
Thank you. Paul, does that apply? So you're dealing with patients, surgery, kind of the sort of hard physical treatments, if you like. What do you see as, does the social bonds, the social situation of the patients, how perhaps they're being treated by the therapists, like how much does all this matter in their care?
I think the thing that continues to intrigue me is how people who have lived their lives with a lot of kindness, with compassion, who are essentially good, and many of them are very poor, have a quantum of happiness, because sometimes I also did palliative medicine, so sometimes when somebody is terminal, I go and sit by their side, and after nearly 50 years, I am beginning to realize that there is the connections that we make and how unselfish our intentionality is creates an unbelievable energy that cannot be actually quantified. Now, these are people who are really suffering from all the medical parameters. I would say that they have a lot of disease, they are actually terminal, they are going in very difficulties. But there is an aura of happiness. In fact, even when they are terminal, when you actually go into the ward and sit with them, you come out not depressed, but elevated.
Can I ask you a question, because it's important to me? With the people that you're talking about that are very sick but have this joy about them, have you found a connection with spirituality?
Absolutely. I think absolutely. I mean, I personally, every morning I listen to Bach. Every morning I like to listen to the Art of the Fugue, something like that, because I find it actually aligns my intellect to cope the irregularities in the world. There is a certain cohesion in the way things together. And I find that consistently having a spiritual idea, I think even as a scientist, even from mathematical standpoint, I begin to realize that till now, man is the measure of all things. That actually becomes a very harsh reality. But if you begin to realize that if you put everything into the human perspective, things become simple and it seems to be solvable. But with the current way in which we are unraveling intelligence, we begin to realize that if we actually posit a higher level of complexity beyond which we are dealing with, it actually gives you a much greater comfort. You can actually align, I think, quantum mechanics with the Newtonian mechanics. And see, every form of mechanics works. I think that's the most comfortable way in which to live. I really think that makes a lot of difference.
I believe that.
It's important for us, though, to remember what the role of our conscious choice making is on this, because we can try to artificially say, oh, let's look at it from, behavior to biology or biology to behavior, but let's just think about our lives. What happens? I'm stressed. I'll speak for myself. I'm stressed. I reach for the sugar. The sugar is going to impact my microbiome. That's going to affect how the expression of certain cytokines are going to be expressed in certain areas of my body. It may actually affect neurochemical expression, which is going to drive my behavior again in a certain way. So here's the loop, right? There's a loop that's constantly happening, and then I get to sort of decide and take a pause and say, wait a minute, is the sugar actually helping me right now? You know, do I want to shift my diet, shift my microbiome, shift my neurochemistry? Because it's a constant loop. It's not just one way or the other way.
Do we need to see it as a kind of, I mean, you're doing this, so a kind of circular
Feed
causation.
forward.
It's not
Yeah.
body controls mind, mind controls body, but we have to think of all these influences
It's a spiral.
feeding off each other.
It's a spiral. So we have feedback loops and feed forward loops, and we know that, and nature cannot exist without both, but especially the feed forward loops. You know, correct me if I'm wrong. That's part of complexity theory. So that's what we understand, is that we are in a spiral, dynamic, always. And so back to what Bruce was saying, our conscious choice making will literally shift the biology. So it is constantly an interaction. The Soul Festival, first of all, is unique in the way that it's beautifully curated. And when I say it's beautifully curated, there is so much thinking behind the progression of the days and the process. And these resonant themes just keep popping out. So whether we're talking about planetary health or personal health, the themes of interconnection, of personal power are so palpable among the speakers and the people here. It's really quite remarkable that we can cover ground all the way from the microbiome to climate change in a way that feels really dynamic and beautiful, weaving together the threads of interconnection throughout the program. It's really beautifully done.
Our well-being is incredibly intrinsically tied up with our environment, with our planetary well-being. So everywhere on Earth, we are now seeing the effects. You know, Canada has been on fire since March. Europe, fires from Greece to Portugal. We've had terrible droughts across China. We are all interconnected now, right? There is no them and us in terms of the global economy and how our financial systems work, our industrial systems. You know, people in Canada, people in Britain cannot afford for China's economy to collapse because of terrible drought. That means they don't have the hydropower stations working, which industry is collapsing. We can't afford anywhere for this to happen. We are all in this together. For me, planetary wellness is only compatible with human wellness. We cannot save our ecosystems, our biodiversity. We cannot talk about sustainability unless we also bring people with us, unless we bring the people, the communities that depend on those ecosystems, that live at the frontiers of our natural environments, unless we bring everybody with them, with us, with this journey to sustainability. Forget it. They are intertwined. So planetary wellness is, for me, about sustainability, and that sustainability is about communities having livelihoods, having hope and opportunities to grow, but also mindfully that we cannot have the same exploitative resource extraction. We need to think about end of life of every product, of every venture, every innovation, right at the beginning, to make sure that we are being truly sustainable, that what we create and what we take is being replaced in some way, either at the end of that product's life or during the product's life with another planting or another reservoir if we're extracting water. We have to think holistically about all of this.
This is the red basil. There's some rosemary over here.
That sustainability is a goal that we want to achieve, but regeneration is what gets us there. So that we've done so much damage now to our landscapes and to the ocean that we need to repair and fix them. We need to regenerate them. And that's what this regenerative movement is that's occurring around the world. It's not enough just to be sustainable. If we're doing the damage we're doing, we've actually got to think about new ways of doing it.
I'm a passionate advocate for the environment, and my contribution, I think, to making it better is through storytelling. And so whether that's making films or writing books, and then I guess building impact campaigns off the back of the story. So it's not enough just to make a film, but then to develop materials that allow people to take action based on an emotion that they might have felt watching that film. So it doesn't just become something that they saw and 10 minutes later they're on social media. They get to actually transmute that emotion, be it anger, rage, hope, whatever it is, into something really practical, whether that's school curriculum materials or sort of policy things or something they can do in their own community. Because I think that's the only way we're going to turn this thing around and get to planetary wellness. We've tried a top-down hierarchical monoculture model, and that's antithetical with nature, antithetical to life. Life needs diversity, it needs community, and that connection of all those communities is what the future has to be. So we all do unique things based on our place, be it the Maldives or Australia. We bring our own unique contribution, that community, to a larger collective whole, like the cells in our body.
The whole eco-center area is covered by solar panels. So once we have installed all these solar panels, then that will contribute somewhere around 50 to 60% of our total energy requirement.
So our local islands, they burn garbage, so they throw it into the sea. Soneva has intervened with that, and then they have, what you have experienced, eco-center, they have built eco-centers in all the islands nearby at all. So whatever plastic we get, we melt it, and this is the results. What we do is we place them inside this machine. This is a CNC cutting machine, and we use aluminum and plastic to create these artworks.
We are seeing impacts that were not expected until the 2040s or even later. And those impacts include the Antarctic ice shelf melting, Greenland ice melt. We are also seeing very concerning perturbations to the ocean currents that drive the Gulf Stream. We're also seeing wildfires way in excess of what we were expecting at this emission that we're at the moment. So, you know, in medicine, in many fields, we apply the precautionary principle, which means that we see what the worst case scenario is and make sure that doesn't happen. But for some reason with climate change, we have not been doing that. We are somehow erring on the side of optimism. Nothing will happen, it's all going to be fine. Ecosystems, the Earth, the planet, will survive. It will go on beyond us. But we humans have built our entire human world, our civilization, everything on the particular climate that existed, the environment, the ecosystems that existed during the last, 10, 20,000 years. And we are now changing that significantly. We've heated the atmosphere, we've heated the oceans, and we have dramatically changed landscapes like forests, wetlands, how and where rivers flow. We've changed those so dramatically in order to have this huge flourishing of human populations. We're 8 billion people, we live better and longer than ever before, but we're now reaching this crisis. We can't go on as we are, because even when we're living in our cities, which we feel are far, far away from the natural environments, there are human-built worlds, we're dependent on that natural world for everything, for our clean air, for our clean water, for all of the resources, and of course for our food. Cities act as factories that bring in everything from the natural world. And if we push that system out of whack, we endanger not so much the ecosystems, but ourselves.
We're talking here in this session about our personal health, what cortisol does as a stress response. We're very focused on ourselves and our own well-being, which is fine. But what we're going to have to process in the decades ahead is going to be a collective trauma of things that we get access to right now are not going to be available to us in the decades ahead. It doesn't have to be nihilistic. It doesn't have to be a Hollywood narrative of society collapsing, but there will be a simplification of things that as supply chains get affected, as climate refugees move around the world, the world we have now will not be the same. So how do we emotionally prepare for that, and our children prepare, instead of pretending that everything's just going to be fine, it's going to get better all the time. They're learning things at school that are so redundant for the skills they're going to need in the future. So we need to have these very honest conversations, and no government wants to, no CEO wants to, because it's political or government suicide. But we're not even talking about this on the news. We don't even mention the records that are tumbling every day because we just don't want to go near it.
I want to talk about the environment since we've already come there. What are some of the most concerning things about the environment that you all feel and see out there today? And you know what, you can even add the solution to it from your point of view. Like, what's the concern and what do you think we need to do to make that change?
I think there's a lot of concerns. I feel like I could talk for hours. There's endless, you know, the ocean, Pacific garbage patch, the ozone layer, there's so many.
Yeah.
So I think going into detail about each and every one isn't super important, but I think a really important solution that I feel like not a lot of people think about is we always talk about what to do. We always say, eat healthier, eat organic, do this, do that, buy more sustainable clothes. But we don't talk about what if we just didn't buy as many clothes? What if we just didn't, I think, do a lot of things that we do? We need to stop chasing, and I think not only does it tie into the environment, but it ties into mental health and physical health. It ties into everything, is that we need to live simpler lives. Because if we're able to just be happy with the things we have or live a very minimal lifestyle, we're not consuming as much, but we're also not outputting as much. But that can also be good for a lot of people.
That's a great observation, but why do you think people are just buying more and more? I see greed and I see filling voids. What do you see as the problem?
Yeah, I think terms like greed is very interesting because you think for a lot of people, and again, I don't know as much about the brain and the neural pathways, but I'm assuming there's some sense of dopamine too is a huge part of it, especially with social media. And there's a lot of need when you have something little that you just keep getting more, and when you keep getting more, it gets worse. And I think that's pretty obvious for a lot of people, but I think getting more things is probably the source of it, and it just exponentially goes off that.
Amazing. All right, great.
Like he said, I think it's our rate of consumption, not what we consume. So I'm also focusing on sustainable fashion, quality versus quantity. And again, your intention of what you're buying, not why you're buying it.
Do you feel the people around you in your generation are all realizing this? Are they making the change, or do you see there's a lot of, divide between these two thought processes?
I see a lot of divide. I was actually really happy to meet everyone here, all the kids, because these are the first kids I've met that had a similar thought process with this topic as me. Everyone at home, it's usually an argument with this.
People, they just don't realize kind of how much this affects the environment and stuff. And I think, because once everyone's kind of starts thinking that way, no one wants to be the first person to kind of speak out about it. And yeah, so people, if you mention climate change or anything, they'll just be like, oh, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't need to worry about it. And they'll just mock you and stuff, which is kind of frustrating.
I think one thing is everyone's always trying to think out of the box by doing these crazy ideas, and I feel like a lot of the time it can also be really useful with the environment to think inside the box. The very simple solutions like going to the store and getting a paper bag or bringing your own bags, even better. Just really simple solutions that are almost inside the box. Sometimes I feel like we need to get back before we can go back out, because if we just keep expanding, I feel like the best solutions are always, a lot of times, the simplest ones.
It's a great perspective. Great perspective.
I just wanted to say, I think I completely agree, because I think people are kind of creating different, complicated solutions to all these problems, but if you just kind of step back, it's not, there's so many things that you can do. Even if it's just planting a tree or bringing your own bags. You don't need to invent all these stuff and create all this waste. It's all there. We know what we need to do, we're just not doing it.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, I'll go to the mall with my friends and I'll be like, hey, do you guys want to go thrifting? They're like, no, we want to go to, Forever 21. And whenever I bring up, unsustainable clothing or whatever, they're like,
oh, you know, us buying this isn't going to change anything, like we're just one person. But if you flip that around, like look how it's affected the world, like each individual person buying that actually has made an impact. So I think, just like you guys said, the little simple things that we do, like if you're able to change them, it actually will make a difference, because it's a group effort, but you know, you have to participate in the group effort.
We're looking for these solutions that don't exist yet, and I think that's almost a form of denial, because we want this other thing that is so infinitely easier when we already have solar and wind farms and sustainable clothing and farming practices that don't influence the environment as heavily, because everything has an impact and we're going to have to accept that as well. But I think the truth is we're going to have to change our lives, and that's not always going to be in what people perceive as a positive way. And it's only when we accept, like, we have this, we're going to have to work with, you know, all the technology we have now to build new stuff. Will we actually find some solutions and some peace with that, instead of just searching for these exotic technologies that'll just fix all our problems?
Absolutely. I'm seeing a commonality of simplicity over here.
I think more and more people are waking up to is that we talk about this term polycrisis or a meta-crisis, is that there isn't one simple reductionist solution anymore. We've got to a point where we need to see all our problems as deeply interconnected, whether it's ocean plastic or coral, but these are all symptoms of a flawed architecture. So unless we address the mechanisms of that system, we're really just kicking the can down the road and tinkering around the edges. So we have to get our politicians, our CEOs on board with larger systemic change. What does it look like to start to pivot a system? It's no easy task, and I think we'll have to go through some challenging times to get there. But we can't keep looking at things in isolation, just emissions, or just that's not it anymore. We have to actually look at it in a much more holistic way. As is happening in medicine, we're looking at the body as a complete field as opposed to something specific. It's the same with the planet and the system we've created.
And now we're aware of it, now we're realising, and now we are doing something about it. You know, it is taking time, it is slow, and yes, you know, there are elements, there are particular, you know, companies or individuals that are spinning a different narrative and actively working against that. But most people want to live in a world where the air is clean, where they don't have to worry about terrible climate change. We want to live in a better world. We just feel powerless within the systems that we have ourselves like emerged into.
Yeah, and we're addicted to it. It's very comfortable, it's very easy. No one wants to give it up. We're not hardwired to like deprivation. We like to get more and move forward. So the thought, and again, this comes back to messaging, if you tell stories of depravity and sacrifice, people are going to shut down. But if you tell them stories of what's to gain from a transition and how they can reconnect in their communities, eat healthier food from rich soils, all those sort of things,
it's
that's
much
what we
more
haven't done
appealing.
enough.
Exactly. It's much more appealing.
And I think of what's happening in agriculture. We talk about, you know, the opportunities or the exciting things that are happening. I think what's happening in agriculture is such a great example of this extractive, conventional practices of destroying life in the soil and replacing it with monocultures. And these farmers right around the world now that are starting to rebuild their soils. And I've probably been on about 40 different properties, and multiple farmers have said to me, I got up every morning to kill things. That's all I did. And now I get up every day to bring it back to life.
What the world needs right now is a cleanse. But this cleanse has to be on a community level. It has to be in agreement with the community, the way communities live, and the way communities eat. Going back to the Middle Ages, basically, where the village was the center of the community and people ate according to the seasons. And if we can go back to being more local, then I think that will be the first step.
Lots of things need to happen to change planetary wellness, but I would say, again, coming from a storytelling lens, is that most people aren't even aware of a story that they're inhabiting, that they live out every day. And that story says that we are separate and superior to nature. And if you think about the stories we tell ourselves, they hugely influence how we interact with people and how confident we are in certain environments, because we're telling a narrative all the time. But we're also telling a story together about who we are, what these trees mean. Are they just trees that we can commodify and cut down and make chairs out of? Or are they actually integrated network of shared nutrients under the ground and insects that live there and transpiring moisture into the world? All the complexity that is a tree. Unless we start understanding and seeing the world through a different lens, telling a different story about who we are and our place in this system, we're going to fly off the cliff, because we're so disconnected from the living world, and that living world is our survival. And so that disconnection will take us to the brink, and if we're going to come back from that and regenerate, we have to realise our place in that system and how much we all rely on each other, the trees and all the living things, and we can't live without them.
One thing that I feel passionately about is that we need to have joined up thinking. We need to be connecting different ways of looking at the world, but also personal health and planetary health. I mean, that's just right there in the title of the festival. We need to see that all of these problems, our physical health, our mental health, the health of the environment, of the planet, all of these things are completely connected. And I think Soul just gets that, encapsulates that so beautifully. So we have people here, specialists in Ayurveda, we have journalists and filmmakers, there are scientists, therapists, like there's just a really exciting mix of worldviews and mindsets, and there's just been such interesting conversations happening. But the topics of the sessions as well, like one moment you'll be talking about epigenetics, and the next moment you'll be talking about how do we build a positive future on the planet for our children. And I think that that's really exciting and really fertile for just reaching new insights. And then the setting is just so inspiring. I didn't fully realize until I came here what Soneva Fushi is doing in terms of being a positive force for change, in terms of looking after the environment. Just such a intelligent, thoughtful, joined up way of looking at how they impact the ecosystem that we're in, from regenerating the coral reefs to recycling waste, not just from this island, but other islands around, and then upcycling a lot of that as well into these beautiful pieces of art. And I'm so happy that my children are here, because they hear so much negative about the environment, and I worry about the anxiety that must be causing for them. Everything seems so desperate and so hopeless, and so to come here and for them to see positive stories about rebuilding, regenerating, how we don't have to necessarily lose our quality of life. We can actually, if we just change how we think, have a really enhanced, positive, more connected way of life, something to, fight for, if you like, as we heard in one of the panels yesterday. I think that's so inspiring for them as well. So I just think it's just that whole picture, that joined up thinking, that I think is really special here.
One of the most amazing things to me on this island is the way that everything's recycled in such an incredible way. You look at recycling in the US, or really in so many places, and we see our recyclables go to this plant that's got fumes of smoke coming out of it. And you're like, how in the world is this more beneficial? But you come somewhere like here and you walk through the recycling area, and the way that it's all recycled is so incredibly efficient and so healthy. And it makes you believe that, oh my gosh, this can be done in a really cool, efficient way. And anyone should be able to replicate something like this.
Soneva Fushi is not just an island. To me, I just wrote an email to some friends. I said, paradise. Because if anybody was coming to Earth for a life experience, I would say first stop here. Because then you'll understand why life is so beautiful and why life offers so much joy, why you want to be here. So Sonu and Eva and William Bissell from Organic India, the organizers that have been putting this together, are futurists the way I see them. They're futurists because they know the world is in a changing state. And rather just playing the old game, they're saying, how can we move into the future and not just survive, but thrive into the future? So putting my feet down on this island was the answer. It's like, oh man, if everybody in the world could just feel how peaceful life is, it would change the whole direction of this planet.
What a time to be alive, like honestly. With everything that's going on and the complexity and the transition, I think historians will look back at this time and go, imagine being alive then, when this entire human race started to pivot their energy system. They started waking up to these old patterns and they started changing. We might not see the benefits of it in our lifetime, it's unlikely, but we get to plant the seeds for a thriving future regenerative civilization. And it's starting now, and we're here as pioneers on the ground doing it. Places like this that will just become commonplace. Like, that's a privilege, you know? So yeah, it's painful and yeah, it's tough. But there's a great Robert Wall Kimmerer quote, and she says that, that even a wounded world is feeding us and giving us moments of wonder and joy. So I choose joy over despair, not because my head's buried in the sand, but because that's what the earth gives me every day, and I'm going to return the gift. And I feel like that too. It's so easy to get despondent, but then you look around and you go, really, like, there's still so much to be grateful for. And if we operate from that place of joy, we're going to impact far more people.
I grew up on the coast, and spending much of my time in the ocean inspired me to learn more about it. And I always knew I wanted to help our oceans and conserve them. I'm Zoe, a marine biologist and project manager for Coral Live. I truly experienced coral reefs for the first time here in the Maldives, and the reality hit me hard. It was the opposite of the vibrant reef I had imagined. There was basically nothing left of the reef. During this time, I met Aki, the founder of Coral Live. Coral Live's main work is coral restoration using mineral accretion technology. I immediately knew that I wanted to change the focus of my career to help the corals.
My wife Ava introduced me to the Maldives in 1987. When we first came to Soneva Fushi, the reef was absolutely unbelievable. It was vibrant and live with coral surrounded by fish. It was the 1998 coral bleaching event when you really started to see the impact on the reefs. The corals died and didn't recover before the next major bleaching event in 2016. With more frequent bleaching events from rising sea temperatures, over 90% of the world's coral reefs are under threat. Coral reefs provide habitat for a quarter of all marine species, coastal protection for communities, and millions of dollars from tourism and recreation. The survival of coral reefs is critical for the Maldives. It is our survival. If we don't change, we will sink, not just as an island, but also as a nation. We've always considered ourselves, Ava and I, as guardians, yes, guardians, not owners, of this place, and we feel that we are here to guard this place for a lifetime and for generations to follow. Nature is resilient, and human endeavor and innovation also contribute to conservation efforts. Our goal is to restore the reefs around Soneva Fushi, Soneva Jani, and our other properties in the Maldives by 2030. And to create a diversity of coral that will survive and thrive. We have not given up. This is why we decided to establish one of the world's largest coral nurseries, powered by mineral accretion technology in collaboration with Coral Live.
This project is a stepping stone between small-scale and large-scale restoration efforts to save entire reefs. After selecting the right location, we first put 432 metal structures in the water, which we all interconnect with cables to run a small electrical current through them. At the center of each circle of tables is an anode. The circular formation around the anodes gives us the most efficient electrical distribution to each table. The electricity creates an environment for corals to thrive. We have observed faster growth and increased resilience to stresses causing bleaching events. Now it's time to start populating the nursery. For Soneva Fushi, we are saving coral from a development site, where the corals are destined to be covered by sand and die. The corals are sent to Soneva Fushi, where the rest of the team receives them and places them on the nursery. The whole team is doing amazing work, and seeing everyone working together towards a common goal makes it an empowering, unforgettable experience. We can grow about 50,000 coral fragments in the nursery, which can then be harvested annually and outplanted to the reef. Knowing we can set up such a huge project in a short amount of time really opens up opportunities for the future. What else can we do? How big can we go? It's very exciting. I don't think we'll ever be finished, but I think we can always strive to do more. I never saw coral reefs before the major bleaching events, so it would be incredible to see them coming back to that level, which would be very motivating to keep going, to aim bigger, and to push forward to do more.
I think the frontiers of wellness are many. There is science happening right, there's quantum physics happening right now, there's the pharmaceuticals growing, there are nutraceuticals growing, but we like to focus on one frontier that will never change, the fundamentals of human health. That will never change. Like sleep, it's non-debatable. Great emotional wellness and the impact on disease, healing, and recovery, that's a fundamental. It's non-debatable, it'll never change. The impact of nutrition, as per your body type. Not what the world's trying to put everyone into a box. Everyone should be keto, everyone should be vegan, everyone should be low carb. No, if it works for you, great. Do it the right way, fantastic. You're getting results that's sustainable, that's a fundamental too. And then movement. These are fundamentals. No matter what happens, they will never change. So we continue to grow and constantly research more and more into these fundamentals. The main frontier being bioindividuality, recognizing that every patient is different. Every person is different. Today we say everyone needs meditation. It's not true. I meet some people who don't meditate and they say, I don't need to. I'm just genuinely happy all the time. You know, I just feel like I'm meditating all the time. So sometimes we need to move people out of the box so we can open up and expand their vision to look at the medicines beyond medicine. I mean, we got to take our chemo, our radiation, take all of that. But what about medicine beyond medicine? These are the frontiers that we're constantly working on. How can we harness the intelligence that exists within us?
Well, for me, the frontier of wellness means, well, I think it's a personal journey. It's not being part of this huge group, the one-size-fits-all approach, because clearly it doesn't. We've got little nuances, we've got different hormone releases, we've got different stresses, and it's about us being able to use technology like blood tests, being able to read them, understanding certain keys from your body. You know, if you've got a headache, there's a root cause to that. Don't just take a paracetamol. Let's get to the root cause of it. Is it a chink in your back? Do you need to see a chiropractor? It's about knowing what's wrong with you so you can fix it at home without having to burden the healthcare system, and you can get on with your life. It's actually regaining power. So you're not wasting time being ill. And it's, for me especially, it's getting ahead of the disease, always staying one step ahead of it, knowing what's coming, knowing if there's a stressor, being able to buffer it. Because I lived quite a stressful life. I actually thrive on stress. I love that cortisol buzz. I like the adrenaline. That's just how I am. But sometimes I can overrun. I can, like, you know, tip into a little bit of acute stress, and I'll take something called L-theanine. It's an amino acid that you find in green and black tea. And I just take a couple of these capsules and boom, my stress levels go down. I'm still functioning, I'm still working quickly, but I've taken the jitter out of it, the anxiety, the fear. So knowing little tricks like that helps me get through a fast-paced life, and I love it. I can take control of my life. No longer am I overburdened and overwhelmed. And that for me is a game changer.
But part of the fascination that I've had in my home field of psychoneuroimmunology, which is where I did my PhD work, is to wonder why we don't place the psyche more in the central force of the picture. That is, what role does the psyche or spirit actually play in healing? So we can look at all these fancy physical measures, but what might be the extension of psychoneuroimmunology if we consider how we feel when we leave a gathering like this, where we feel so invigorated, so connected with nature, so filled up from our conversations to the point where it really feels palpable, right? There's an exchange taking place. Is that real? And how would we even go about understanding it? And how might it actually solve some of the health problems that we have today? The frontier of science that I'm working with right now is called biofield science. It's the study of fields of energy and information that guide our health. We typically think of ourselves as physical beings, and we are. We have this beautiful physical body. We want to take care of it. We want to nurture it, but we also have, of course, an emotional life, and we have an energetic life. The ancients understood this well, and now with science, we're beginning to uncover these mysteries of things like energetic and spiritual healing, and even the bioelectromagnetic nature of our body, and how working with our bodies, both electrically and in subtle energetic ways, can actually foster deep healing, even on the cellular level. What is the nature of who we are? Unbounded, beyond our conditioned mind, beyond even our thoughts, beyond our emotions. What is that? We are microcosms of the entire universe. We are the universe. We are embodiments of that universe. Our true nature, from the Vedic and Tantric perspectives, is described as Sat Chit Anand, pure consciousness, pure bliss, all-knowing, and truth. Biofield science is an emerging science in the Western world. Now, from the ancient indigenous traditions, the understanding of fields of energy and information has always been there. It's guided our practices, it's guided our medicine. It's why we talk about things like vital energy, chi and prana. So that's part of biofield science. Western science is just beginning to look at this. We do studies, for example, with energy healing, with acupuncture, even things like pranayama, which is meant to literally move life force, right? Pranayama actually means life force extension. So we look at it in those ways. But we're even doing things like looking at the biofields of cells, where we're looking at cell-to-cell communication electrically and determining how cells are communicating in ways that might drive cancer or drive health.
We're moving out of an old period where we saw ourselves as victims of things around us, things inside of us that not were in harmony at all, causing illness and disease. And now we're recognizing that that's not a natural state for humans. We came here and came into an environment that supported who we are, or otherwise we wouldn't have evolved at this point. And the relevance is to go back and understand how to live in that harmony. Well, this is totally important in medicine today, because we now recognize that disease and illness is not a natural consequence of human biology, that all of us, not all of us, but a large percentage of us, got here with a wonderful set of genes to have a healthy, happy, loving existence on this planet. So the question is, then why do we have a healthcare crisis? And that all of a sudden comes down to a very simple fact: stress, that we're being pushed to compete. A lot of it has to do with Darwinian theory of evolution, because in summary, it's referred to as survival of the fittest in the struggle for life, a belief that life is a hardship and that we have to fight through it, when this is completely wrong, because today's science recognizes that evolution is based on cooperation, not competition. So it changes the whole game plan of being here, working together in harmony instead of who's the one-upmanship better than the other one. Who can compete and be the winner? It's like when that happens, there are no winners anymore. Then it's a battleground.
There's a lot that I'm excited about in the frontier of wellness right now. So my work specifically, I call myself a holistic anxiety coach, but what I'm really doing beyond just coaching is helping people to heal the emotional unrest that manifests as physical and cognitive anxiety, right? So we're working at the core, and that has to be, it has to be an integrative approach, right? So we're using mind, body, and soul together in our healing process. And so what I'm so excited about, especially over the past few days at this festival, especially, is the conversation around healing in the medical community and in the academic communities. It's now so much more open to the truth that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And now that we have data to support the existence of a biofield, which is the auric field, which we've known for centuries, right? But we're seeing the data that allows the more traditional medical and scientific communities to integrate ancient knowledge and what we've already known. And so from my perspective, when we're talking about emotional health, mental well-being, and really embodiment of the best, most happy felt versions of ourselves, we need the buy-in from these traditional communities. And so to see that happening it's so exciting.
What we've learned is what is so extraordinary to me is we can get so microscopic about it down to these lovely little guys that we used to think only made ATP, the mitochondria. So the mighty mitochondria in our bodies are what produces our energy that we can actually sit here and engage with each other. But what's really extraordinary, you mentioned longevity. Our mitochondria are what are in charge of our longevity. That is our fountain of youth. And the other amazing thing is I think about these beautiful, powerful little organelles that they're just, he talked yesterday about sensory input. This is what we're reacting to and responding to. But where we can take it down to that level even further is at that cellular molecular level. Our mitochondria are the most ultimate receiving of information. That information may be light. We have the cytochromes in our mitochondria that absorb particular frequencies of light. That is so extraordinary to me. It also takes in frequency of sound. It takes in oxygen. It takes in nutrients. It takes in toxins. It takes in emotions. It takes it all in. And it can get jammed up anywhere along the way, depending on the good and the bad we put into it.
What I'm seeing in the frontiers of sound currently are people really waking up on all different levels to the fact that frequency, resonance, is where healing lies. I think that the future of healing literally is being unlocked right now, and that is frequency and resonance medicine. I'm really happy because I see people starting to use their voices again. I think for so many years now in society, there has been this idea that singing is for professionals. And I think that's the first time in human history that that's been the case. And I think we have seen for a while people with very shut down voices. And I'm noticing that there is this resurgence of singing and different guides who are helping people to get back in touch with their voices. It's definitely one of my missions is to not just perform, but to actually inspire others to reconnect with their voice, with their divine spark. And I really see that that's starting to happen. So just that idea that sound opens up a portal of possibility, I think in itself is massive and healing. And then when we get to physical levels, literally the way sound and frequency affects us on our cellular levels is incredible.
The frontier of wellness that I'm working with is business, how we can make business a force for good. Organic India, the company I work for, is basically based on the principle of business being a vehicle of consciousness, where we use all our business activities and work with thousands and thousands of farmers across the world to bring to our customers products that are conscious, that are rooted in Ayurveda and Indian traditional healing systems, but at the same time informed by science, modern science. So we bring together these two very different worlds and give to our customers across the world products that bring wellness to their lives, at the same time being very conscious of the supply chain, of the people behind it, our employees, our people who are working with us, our vendors. So I think business and Organic India forever, like since 25 years, has been at the frontier, very frontier of wellness, bringing about a very holistic vision of health and wellness, where health does not only mean health of the body, but also of the communities that we live in, we work with, and the planet as a whole.
In all of our practices, whether they're yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, or even energy healing, we talk about the flow of energy balance, not as just a metaphor, but as an actual. So for those of you who are practitioners and you begin to feel, of course, this vital energy flow, you know that you can continue to cultivate this subtle sense. And it is by sensing and working with the energy that you can actually restore harmony in the body.
When we study biofield science, we're actually looking at biofields because, like we know in complexity theory, it's turtles all the way down. So we can look at the biofield of a cell, we can look at the biofield between cells, we can look at the biofields between us in a healing encounter, we can even look at the biofield of the earth and the human-earth connection. And when we look at the biofield in this way, it helps us understand how deeply interconnected we are with each other and the environment, but also how we heal, even on the electrical level.
My favorite research at the moment is into the emotion of awe. This is defined as the feeling that we get when we are confronted by vastness, when something is just so huge, it's impossible for us to comprehend. It's a bit different from what you might think of as wonder, which is a bit more analytical. We're trying to sort of solve a mystery or fix a problem. Or is when you just let go of that urge to explain, you just give in to the mystery. It's that wow, jaw-dropping feeling. And psychologists have been studying this for the past decade or so, and they're finding that it has some really interesting and important effects on us. So when people experience a feeling of awe, they're more creative afterwards, more curious, they feel happier, less stressed, even weeks later. And this feeds through into their biology as well. So you see boosted activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, which acts in opposition to fight and flight and promotes those rest and digest responses. And you also see reduced inflammation. And this is to a greater extent than you get with other positive emotions like pride or amusement or joy, for example. So you've got physical health benefits there. But what I think is really interesting about it is you get a shift in perspective, that people say that they feel more connected. They make more ethical, generous decisions. They're more likely to help a stranger who's in trouble. They care less about money, and they care more about the planet. So this shift away from the self.
Well, the frontier that I'm part of is called biohacking, and it sounds a bit more complicated than it actually is. Ultimately, it's getting to know your own chemistry, your own biology, so that you can operate at a higher level, really. So you sleep better, you react better, you're more creative, you're just more pleasant to be around, I hope.
Of course, the world is changing today. Disease is changing. Cancer cells are getting more aggressive. You will need treatment. But while I'm in that process, how am I harnessing my own intelligence that already exists? When I rebalance, the intelligence takes over. When I'm in chaos, there's disharmony. So that's another frontier that we don't forget. We're not asking people to choose, we're asking people to integrate.
It's the 21st century, but we've got to use ancient nutrition to work in this century, and that needs technology in there. So there is like, it's a great mix of the ancient meets the futuristic. I love that vibe, I love it.
And so what we're really seeing in today's new science is harmony, peace, and bringing people to that place of harmony and peace, because that's where the healing comes from.
The Soul Festival is a manifestation of our vision and our deep belief that wellness has to be seen from the personal to the planetary, and we believe that there could not have been a better partner than Soneva, who also believes in this idea that health and wellness are key to what they do, and therefore it brings us together to create this platform for people across the world to come and share the top knowledge on global wellness trends, and we really hope that it'll develop into something really awesome, and the world will really benefit from what we are doing here at the Maldives.